right, so let's talk about yogurt pH and CFU dynamics. What does this mean? When I have milk and I put yogurt in it, how do the bacteria, the CFUs, colony-forming units, how do the bacteria, how do they ferment, and how is it going to influence the pH of my milk, which then will transform into yogurt over time when I put it into my incubation chamber? So this is a fascinating microbial subject. Because it's a little bit invisible to the naked eye, let's dive in to see what's going on so that when you go to make yogurt on your own, you have an idea of what's actually going on. So here at 0, what is this? Here I have inoculated my heated and cooled milk with a previous batch of yogurt, and I have my CFUs. So in common yogurt, I'm going to get about 6 billion CFUs. So I'm going to have 1 teaspoon of 6 billion yogurt CFUs. And so I'm going to put this teaspoon in here. Here I'm going to have an inoculation of yogurt, and I will have my CFU Dynamics be my black pen, and I'm going to have pH be my red pen so that we can watch the dynamics of how these two lines are going to interplay with one another. So to get started, we're at 0, we've just inoculated, and my CFUs, my bacteria count is minimal. It is at its inoculation phase. Where is my pH of my heated and cooled milk? So heated and cooled milk is gonna be at about a 6.5 in pH, so we're gonna be at about right here. So what can I expect my pH to do in my yogurt over time? So in yogurt, so this will be for traditional French yogurt, but this will be kind of a model for all other kinds of lactic acid bacteria ferments, both homo and hetero fermenters. It'll give you an idea of what's happening, because in yogurts, in traditional French yogurt, you're going to have Streptococcus thermophilus, and you're going to also have Lactobacillus delbrueckii bulgaricus. The other types of lactobacillus types of bacteria will also do the same type of pH lowering, lactic acid making. So all types of lactic acid bacteria are going to make acids. So the pH scale that you're going to see here will be similar across almost all types of ferments in this case. And so what we're going to know and keep in mind is that for this model that I'm doing, of course, this is not a lab experiment. I'm giving you a visual to help you have an idea of what's going on when you're in your home kitchen. For traditional French yogurt, it sets at between a 4 and 6 hour mark. And so what that means is that the setting point, casein, is going to solidify and go from a fluid milk into a solid yogurt at a 4.5 pH. So about right here and right here will be our sweet spot. And so how about we'll do an average, and we'll do our pH hitting a 5 right here. And this will be our set point. So how about let's put a dot right here. Okay, so next, I also know that if I ferment my French yogurt for too long, eventually it'll start to separate into curds and whey. And that means that I have over fermented. When does this happen? This happens at about a pH of kind of like a 4.2, but for the sake of the video, we'll do a 4.0. And how about let's put our dot at about right here at 8 hours. And if I were eventually to keep fermenting, it would keep going down a little bit, but this pH curve is going to have its dynamics happen right here. It's going to be a nice, beautiful drop, and then it's just eventually going to plateau out down here, and it'll be too acid. But at this point down here, it's going to stabilize, but it will have a decay phase in the bacteria. So the pH won't change much here, but eventually you'll get your bacteria that are dying because it's too acid. And so let's make a nice little line here. All right, so we are going to have a straight line here because that's our starting pH. And then we're going to have more of an up and down. I'm just going to freehand this, guys. Up and down. Oh my God, I did that so well. Okay. And so then eventually it's just going to kind of peter out, and we're going to do one of these guys right here. Oh my goodness, that looks so good. All right. That is what our pH line is going to look like. And so just as a reminder, we have our solidification, yogurt solidification pH right here at 5 hours at a 4.5. And we're going to have our auto inhibition, so bacterial decay phase happening here at our separation point, which is at about 8 hours. Now, reminder, this is just a model. This is not actually what's happening in a scientific lab. The scientific lab would have more precise variables. This is just a nice visual for you. And then our starting pH is going to be here at a 6.5. Okay, so now moving on to bacteria, we're going to put this pen away and pick this one up. When we look at bacterial metabolism, it's going to be more complex and that there's going to be stages. You're going to get, they've just been introduced, so you're going to get a lag phase. You're going to, oh my goodness, they're from the refrigerator and they're cold and they're asleep and they're going to wake up. They're going to take time to wake up. And then eventually they're going to say, oh my goodness, it's warm, there's food, we're going to populate, we're going to eat. And then you're going to want to time your ferment so that you pull it as soon as your pH hits about here. That's where your bacterial population is going to be at its richest. If you let it go past its what we'll call the stationary phase, you'll start depleting nutrients and your bacteria are going to be hungry. Yes, it'll be more acidic, but no, your colony forming units will not be higher, they will technically be lower. And so you're going to get this kind of, so a lag phase, a log phase, a stationary phase, and then once you hit this line right here, you're going to get a decay phase. And that's where your bacteria are going to be dying. So what I'm going to do is, because I have this beautiful line right here, I can see at about right here, it really starts to get a little bit more dynamic. And so right here is where I will define my first section of my bacterial phase. And this is going to be our lag phase right here. And so our bacteria, they are going to be, oh, good morning, waking up. It's time for breakfast. It's time to eat. It's time to get started. And they're going to start increasing about right here. Then next, we are going to have a beautiful log phase. So it's going to explode up in our 6 billion yogurt CFUs. And that's going to be at our yogurt solidifying point. And so we're going to make a line about right here, because you can see right here, my line is really dynamic and going down in pH, and then it does peter out. It does stop being so dynamic. And so this phase right here, we're going to call it it's going to be our dynamic phase. This is going to be where most of our activity is happening. But technically we can call it our log phase. And so what we're seeing is that there's going to be an exponential growth of bacteria. In these bacteria, they're eating the lactose, they're eating the galactose, and they're eating the glucose from these milk sugars. And from eating these milk sugars, they're making acid. And so because they're making acid, the pH is going to have its most dynamic drop here. So this is our dynamic logarithmic phase of fermentation for yogurt. So now moving on, what is happening next? So this phase right here. Now, if CFUs is your main goal here, you're going to want to pull your yogurt right here as soon as it solidifies. So the pH hitting a 4.5, you grab a pH strip, you look for the 4.5 right here, you stick your little pH strip in, you try to measure it, and you aim for that 4.5. When you see 4.5, you say, stop, it's done, no more, full stop. More acid is not good, and I'll explain why in a little bit. However, if you were wanting a more tart French yogurt, you would want, so tart, more acid, you'd take your acidic, you would continue to ferment your yogurt so it continues to drop in pH. So you'd get a more acidic yogurt as your final product, and so you would take it farther out. That being said, this is our high point right here in our bacteria. The jar, so here's my glass, your jar is full. Your jar of bacteria is at its maximum. It is full to the brim of population, and it is good. So what that means is that if CFUs is your main concern, you're going to want to stop it right here where your pH is at about a 4.5. But if you're wanting a more tart yogurt experience, you're going to want to find it at its 4.5 and maybe take it out another like 30 minutes, half hour to watch the pH drop, and you can look at that through your little pH strips if you like. And so you're going to have a very slight stationary phase in your yogurt microbes where they're going to, be like this for a little bit. And then, so let's talk about our yogurt bacteria. In the stationary phase, growth halts. You can't fit any more bacteria in here. The nutrition in the milk, so milk has fatty acids, it has B vitamins, it has food for these microbes alongside the lactose. And you need those ingredients, the lactose and the B vitamins and the fatty acid profile and enough water content and enough, and there are these factors. And as these bacteria continue to eat these factors, they're going to metabolize it and they're going to make more acid. And eventually you're going to deplete the lactose and these other food sources for these microbes to work. And eventually they are going to have, when they run out of food, they're going to hit what we call the decay phase or the auto-inhibition phase. But before that auto-inhibition phase, you're going to get a stationary phase. And that stationary phase is going to be about, let's say, so if we hit 5 right here, let's say our stationary phase is going to be at about right here. So in the stationary phase, bacterial growth halts. It comes to a stop. It realizes that it's at its capacity. The nutrients available in here will continue to deplete because you're going to have stationary bacteria here. It's going to maintain its population, but the pH will continue to drop. And so that dropping of the pH is going to be a indicator that the bacteria are technically still eating. And then they're going to eat to a point where they are going to have no more food left for the other bacteria. And so we're going to keep in mind that bacteria are really simplistic. Microbes in general are very simplistic. They're going to be dormant here. They're going to be given access to optimal food, temperature, and oxygen availability. And so here they're, oh my goodness, they're just going to replicate. They're going to eat and replicate and make acid. They're born to do that. And then eventually when there's no more, they'll just keep doing something to practically their own demise. And so they just know how to eat and replicate until their own demise. And so right here, they're going to be like, oh, hang on, wait, it's getting too acid. And so at this point, so this technically, this phase right here, this will be our decay phase, where our bacteria are going to decline. The CFU units, they're going to start going down. Okay, so let's talk about the decay phase. This phase is fascinating. This is where you're going to get good yogurt and eventually it's just going to start to separate. And if you want to learn more, you can watch my video on never get your yogurt to separate again for more information. But this is a fascinating and very under-discussed phenomenon in fermentation. And it has huge implications in your CFUs because it is going to dramatically impact your CFU units and it will drop. When you watch a probiotic be made in a lab, they are going to find this point right here and then they're going to cease all activity and they'll pull their microbes out and they'll freeze dry them here. And they do not want this acidic phase to take over because they'll get, other metabolites. When you have a bacteria that's going into here, your bacteria are going to slow down. They're going to slow down first, and then they're going to be like, oh, wait, and they're going to be like, oh, I don't feel good. And then all of a sudden they're just going to die out, because when you hit a decay phase, there are notions within your decay phase. You could almost break this up into more sections where you get the, oh, I'm not feeling too well. Oh, I'm actually sick. Oh, I'm dead kind of idea. So at this first part right here, the pH is going to start dropping to a certain critical level where the lactic acid bacteria are going to struggle to maintain their own pH. So when your lactic acid bacteria are eating and they're making lactic acid out, so technically they're going to pump out protons in order to stay stable. So let's bring in a visual. Let's say that this is our yogurt medium, and this is my little lactic acid bacteria. Now, my lactic acid bacteria is going to be acid tolerant, not acidophilic. Acid tolerant is going to tolerate an acidity between 6.5 and about a 4. But when you get down past, or even like a 4.2, within this range, it depends on the lactic acid bacteria. But when you get into this range, your little guy, you says, oh my goodness, I can't tolerate, these areas down here. And so he's actively going to say, I can't do this anymore. And so he's going to have metabolic stress. When you, a human, you go into a sauna or you go into the freezing cold, if your conditions are too extreme, you're going to say, hang on, I can't do this. And so the same thing here. If he's in too acidic of an environment, he's acid tolerant. He's not acidophilic. And you'd get more acidophilic in like vinegar types of ferments rather than lactic acid bacteria ferments. And so you'd want to pay attention to that when you're making your yogurt and keeping these types of what are my preferred conditions for my bacteria in mind. So when my yogurt hits a 4.5 in pH, and then it hits eventually like a 4.3, 4.0, down to like a 3.5. Here, my little guys, they're happy campers. These guys, they swim here easily. But one thing to keep in mind is that inside of the cell, it's all lactic acid bacteria. They're going to prefer a 6.0 to a 7.5 internal pH. Like what does that mean? How does that work? Well, just like a human, you're going to be 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, 37 degrees Celsius on the inside, but you can live in an environment that's tropical or Arctic and still survive. You can still be fine, so your environment can be different. But you would still maintain this stable internal environment within your own body. Same concept here. These guys, so this is all lactic acid bacteria, labs. And these yogurt lactic acid bacteria are going to prefer a 6.0 to a 7.5 pH. But and these specific guys are going to be acid tolerant. Not acidophilic. Here and here, acidophilic is going to be here, and they're not going to do well. And so, as these guys are eating lactose, they're going to be making lactic acid. And lactic acid, 3 carbons, 6 hydrogens, and 2 oxygens, and 3 oxygens, excuse me. And this is technically a weak acid, and so sometimes you're going to have some of these hydrogens kind of detach out. And so you'll get free floating hydrogens. And what is pH? pH is potential of hydrogen. And so pH is the negative log of your hydrogen concentration. So you're going to get a potential of hydrogenation, potential of protonation. So making of protons, making of protons, more hydrogen, more acid. And so lactose microbe makes lactic acid, gets more of these. This gets more acid. The pH goes down because there's more of these hydrogens out in the medium, because lactic acid is a weak acid. It easily dissociates into H5O3, which is lactate negative plus H positive. Then as these go up exponentially, as you get more hydrogens, as your medium gets more and more acidic, these guys can't keep up, and their little membrane their little membrane right here, hydrogens are going to get to be so rich in the medium that they're going to start leaking in. So the boat is sinking, guys. The boat is sinking. There's so much water. There's so much water out in the ocean, and my boat is taking on water. And so these guys are going to start try to push them back out. It's going to try to push them back out, and that is going to expend ATP. And this is going to tire them out, and they're going to not like that. And then eventually, as they get weaker, you know, you in a sauna, eventually you can't hang. You got to go out into a more mild climate. You can't survive in a too Arctic or too tropical, too sauna-like climate for too long. Your body can't do it. Same thing. These guys, they can't tolerate when it gets too acidic, when there's too much hydrogen in the environment. And so they're going to start, the water is getting into the boat, guys. And so they're going to say, hang on, we got to throw out this water. We're going to throw out these hydrogen, and it's going to spend ATP, and then it's going to tire them out. And eventually they're going to have metabolic collapse. So technically, you know, they're fainting. And so they fainted. And so then after they fainted, you know, these hydrogens flood in because nothing is no longer, because they can't expend any more ATP. So these guys are going to flood in, and he's going to be not just fainted, he's going to be dead. He's going to be super dead, and he will never live again, just like any other lactic acid bacteria. And so that is when you start going back to your decay phase, and it does, and so you get that first phase, and then it just dies. And so that's the interesting dynamic between how you go from a good acid tolerant environment, and you want to pull your ferment at the right time, to you know, not having there be too much acid in your environment, having it separate, having your microbes die, and having there be metabolic collapse, and your yogurt having a decay phase where it's separated into curds and whey again. And so if our curds and whey complete yogurt separation phase is about right here, like from the beginning of our video, you'll know that like our auto inhibition phase, so they're going to start at about like right here-ish. And this is obviously an estimate. And this is where your bacteria are going to start fainting. And then eventually they're going to die. And then eventually it'll get so acid that they'll just start disassociating from one another. And this is where your curds and whey type of aspect gets, where that's what you get from overly fermented yogurt. So your probiotic viability, are you actually eating live microbes here? Probably not. And also, these live microbes right here, these guys, they're super dead. These barriers right here have broken. And so all of its organs, all of its dead organs have lysed and have been expressed out into your yogurt medium now. And so all of the dead organelles and compounds that are within your little dead bacteria have now been expressed out into your yogurt medium. And so what is my big takeaway from all of this? If you are going to make yogurts, you inoculate at this point, you know, watch my videos if you want to learn, and I would pull it either here or here. Both of these options are good, and do know that when you put it in the fridge, you take your bacteria out of their fermentation range. And so here in this whole thing, we are at about 110 degrees Fahrenheit or 43 degrees Celsius, which is our fermentation temperature for our yogurt microbes, our lactic acid bacteria, like this temperature right here. Other lactic acid bacteria will prefer other temperature ranges. Keep that in mind. That is important. But if I pull my yogurt here or here and I put it into the refrigerator, which is at about like a 38 degree Fahrenheit or like 2 degree Celsius environment, these bacteria, they're going to just slow down just a lot. And so they're not going to stop. They're going to just slow down exponentially. So if I pull here, and if I pull my yogurt out of my incubation chamber here, maybe a week later, the pH will have gone from here to maybe about here, or maybe from here to here. And that's all dependent on when you're eating, but your refrigerator is not a fermentation stopping machine, it is a fermentation slowing machine. So even if it is in a cold environment, your bacteria will continue to, your microbes will continue to metabolize the sugars in here. And so if you pull your yogurt right here, do keep in mind, you maybe want to eat that quicker, or maybe you want to make frozen yogurt and freeze it, or maybe you want to just have it faster so that you're not keeping your microbes in this overly acidic environment, because you're a week later, your viable microbial CFU count is probably just going to go down here. You're not going to be all the way down here because your pH isn't going to drop that far. But if you're wanting to eat your yogurt for your therapeutic CFU count, you'd want to maybe pull it here rather than over here where your pH is. And because if you pull it too late, you might not be getting the amount of CFUs that you're wanting. But if you want tart yogurt, because tart yogurt is delicious and a fantastic dessert, then pull it here and you'll be just fine. And you just will have a little bit less CFUs, but there's the dynamic of the two. How many CFUs do you want, or how much acidity do you want? Both options are great, but you don't ever want to take it so far that your acid gets to be so much that your yogurt separates into curds and whey. Anyway, I hope you liked this video and that it helps you understand better the yogurt pH and CFU dynamics of when you're making yogurt and how fermentation works. If you have questions, please ask in the comment section below. Once again, my name is Matthew Cress of Cress Dietetics, and I want to thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.